Good evening, everyone. Yesterday, I came back from southern Turkey, Gaziantep, the border with Syria. Now, yesterday, 83% of the refugees registered in southern Europe, in Greece, came from Syria too. Now, I'm going to address 3 perceptions about the Syrian exodus and what it is all about. The international refugee system is outdated. This is built on the UN Convention for Refugees from 1951. This was a situation in which there were 30 million displaced people in Europe. The Refugee Convention was made for this. In 1967, it was expanded to the rest of the world. In fact, the UN Refugee Convention and its structure was made precisely for the type of conflicts and refugee displacement we have in the Middle East. So why doesn't it work? Well, it doesn't work because it doesn't apply. If you look at the countries in the Middle East, those countries surrounding Syria, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Lebanon, they are not parties to this system. Only Egypt, Yemen, Israel, Iran, and Turkey are members. Turkey, however, has reserved refugee status for those coming from the north and not for Syrians. Now, this is some of the reasons that we see what we see in the Middle East. Now, why is this the case? Well, this is because this is a region that has been plagued by the Palestinian refugee crisis for decades. The Palestinian refugee crisis is the reason why it is prohibited to import one single tent into Jordan. This is the reason why the Turks still call Syrian destitute living in the south guests. In fact, the institutional legal framework for refugees in the Middle East, in Syria, and in surrounding countries are among the worst in the entire world. So the Syrian refugees are reaping the rotten fruit of the Palestinian refugee situation. Hence, the second perception is that there is a war in Syria, which has killed more than 250,000 people. It has injured more than 1 million. Surely the UN Security Council doesn't work anymore. Now, the UN Security Council is the most important body in the world responsible for dealing with peace and security issues. And in fact, it is working in more efficient ways, more effectively, than it has ever done in its history. Currently, they have 16 peace operations going on around the world. When the UN Security Council acts under its mandate of Chapter 7, it can authorize military interventions into other countries. So what has it done in Syria? Well, it has done quite a lot. It has removed chemical weapons from Syria. It has said the borders of Syria don't apply when it comes to humanitarian assistance. It has said it is prohibited to be engaged in any type of financing of ISIL, and it has said we all need to prosecute foreign terrorist fighters going to Syria to prolong the war. Okay, so if it can do this, why hasn't it stopped the war? 2 reasons are more important than others. Because of Syria's location. Syria is located to the south of the NATO country, Turkey. NATO has borders also with Georgia, where the Russians are present. And the Russians, they have had military interests in Syria for decades and decades. Now the question is, if you want the Security Council to authorize a military intervention into Syria, who is going to do it? NATO? Well, the Russians wouldn't like that. Russians? Well, Turkey certainly wouldn't like that. So the question is, which of these two are going to own Syria after the military intervention? However, even more important than this is the setup of security in the world today. We have the UN Security Council on top. It's an outdated body because there are 5 members that are more powerful than others, and certainly that doesn't reflect the current world. But this is how it is, because those 5 members have veto to change the system. However, the way this works is that in each single area of the world, you have regional security organizations, alliances that have built regional institutions responsible for the security in their region. This you have in America, South America, you have it in Africa, you have it in Europe, you have it in Asia. But there is one place where there is no such regional security institutions: in the Middle East. This is where the regional security institutions reach. In the periphery and in the center, there is nothing. So the question is, if you want a military intervention into this area, who is going to do it when you don't have a regional security organization? Because you cannot allow one of the regional powers to come in and own the country. And those who are outside of the Middle East don't want to do it, not necessarily because they don't want to, but they do not think that this is going to solve the problem, and certainly not in the long run. This is something for the regional states to own and to build. So, third, the wars in the Middle East are all about religion. Farce. This is not wars of religious radicalism against religious radicalism, essentially. And it is certainly not a war of Islamic radical or Islam fighting against other beliefs, such as Christians, Jews, and other religious sects. Now, the minorities in the Middle East are certainly affected by the wars, and in very bad ways, but that is not the core of what's going on. Over the last 5 years, 95% of the victims of terrorist attacks with Muslim perpetrators have been Muslims. 95%. This is a war among Muslims. It is fitna. So, let us rephrase. The wars in the Middle East are about Islam. It's a war inside Islam. Perhaps somewhat more true, but still false. There has been going on a reformation within Islam for the last 100 years, where Muslims are struggling with how to adapt their scripture and their traditions to modern life. 25 years ago, when the Cold War ended, and with increased globalization, and certainly with increased communication, the closeness, the distance between a Muslim way of life and modernity has decreased, and this tension, this process has intensified, and the conflict has intensified. But this is not what the wars in the Middle East are about either. Although, in that spectre, you have everything reaching from modern, liberal, almost secular European Muslims, on the one hand, to the ideologies of ISIL on the other, and every flavor in between. The point is that the wars in the Middle East are a result of something else. The major countries in the Middle East, the major states, they have used their version of Islam, tried to instrumentalize it in order to reach out and be the lead nation of the Muslim Ummah. The Muslim Ummah consists of 1.8 billion people in the world, 57 nations. It's a huge community worldwide. these states in the Middle East have used their own interpretations and tried to expand them, using them to increase national interests and their own position. Saudi Salafism, Sunni Salafism, Shia Muslim jihadism, the resistance movement, and modern Turkish Muslim Brotherhoodism. In the wars in the Middle East, these countries have lost control. When the Americans started to withdraw militarily, slowly, 8 years ago, the competition between major states in the Middle East increased, because who is going to fill the vacuum after the American partial withdrawal? In that conflict, their versions of Islam have been instrumentalized. So, the wars in the Middle East currently are not about Islam, they are about national interests of regional states. So, the refugee system is not outdated. But the states in the Middle East cannot continue to use populations in their territories in order to pressure their enemies politically. The states in the Middle East have to join the international refugee systems, institutionalize this. The Security Council works. It is more efficient than it has ever been in its 70-year-old story. And we should be very, very grateful for that, because the type of world we are moving into, what we really need is an efficient Security Council. But the Security Council itself cannot do anything if they do not have regional security institutions to do the job regionally for them. This is what the regional states in the Middle East will have to build themselves. Only the states in the Middle East can choose institutional integration into the global system instead of war. Lastly, the lead nations of the Muslim world cannot continue to use doctrinal and sectarian differences within Islam as a tool to improve and to pursue their national interests. The Muslim Ummah is facing various types of radicalization. In Europe, we're talking about what tools do we have to stop this radicalization. Now, we can do many things, and certainly in the great efforts that the Muslim nations in the Middle East will have to do in the years to come, Europe should stand up to help them. But it is only the major nations in the Muslim world, specifically in the Middle East, who hold the key to fighting radicalism within Islam. Thank you very much.